This video gives you a walkthrough of the Eclectic Leadership Movement and its key elements. I'll walk you through slide by slide to introduce you to the mission, the models, the concept, the problem that we are trying to solve, and how you can join the movement to lead with more clarity, connections, and confluence. So let's start. First up, I want to highlight that this is going to be a very informal video. It's not scripted at all. So please bear with me as I take a deep dive into the brief and walk you through the core thinking process, which I'm sure you'll find very interesting. First up, that you see on the cover, that eclectic leadership movement is like an orchestra. So we start with a metaphor so that it's you understand it better. That what we're saying is that humanity as a whole, it's an orchestra of different instruments and sounds, right? So as you can see in an orchestra, there are different types of instruments which create different sounds, but together they need to create a symphony, right? Each of these instruments that you see in an orchestra are unique, like the guitar, the piano, you have the violin, the cello, and the flute, everything. All these instruments are different, and the musicians who know how to play these instruments are masters in their own fields. But each of these are unique, but these are not sufficient on their own, because in an orchestra it has to be harmonized. There has to be this symphony, and you just cannot play your tunes just because you know how to play it better. You have to be in sync, not only with the other musicians. You need to also keep an eye on the MC, the leader who is leading the orchestra here, right? So this eclectic leadership creates this harmony that transforms our diversity that we have as human beings, and this transforms this diversity as a power into a shared symphony of clarity, connection, and confluence. So this is the metaphor that I wanted to convey to you upfront while I walk you through this brief, that eclectic leadership is best understood through the metaphor of an orchestra. Okay. Now, when you look at the next one, let's look at the definition of what exactly does eclectic, the very word, what does it mean? So, eclectic means being open to, drawing from, and making sense of insights, ideas, instructions, inspirations from diverse sources. So that is what we mean by eclectic. The very term eclectic means that you don't have a fixed mindset. You have an open and a flexible mindset, and you're happy to, you're curious to, you're always active to draw from various sources. Now, one key caveat that I want to highlight here is that merely drawing from various sources might not be enough in the end. You might end up being more confused than you were before. But what do you do with all of that? That's whole aspect of synthesizing all of these information that you're drawing from various sources. That is where the true mastery of eclectic leadership lies. So more on that in the next slide. But generally, for a definition, this is what eclectic means: that you're being open, you understand that the way you think or what you know, that is not the only or the final or the absolute perspective. There is a strong possibility of arriving at the same destination through various alternatives. Being open to that kind of a perspective, that being open to that kind of a thought process, is what eclecticism is all about. Now, what is then eclectic leadership? So, how we're defining it is that in a world we're living in now, it's full of confusion. You look around, you look at the media, you look at your social media, you speak with your friends and families and colleagues. This world is full of confusion. It's full of conflicts and contradictions, right? And people, uh, generally, the leaders, the people tend to be getting more and more polarized, more and more confrontational. Now, eclectic leadership is the newest practice for leading yourself and others in this kind of a confusingly conflicting, contradicting world that we are living in now. And eclectic leadership is that newest perspective that we have. so that you can lead yourself better and you can lead others better in the society, business, and politics. So the fundamentals of eclectic leadership is not the fundamentals are not limited to corporates only, because we are all human beings, and the fundamentals of eclectic leadership can be applied across the board. So in leadership in society, business, and politics, the same principles will apply. The context is definitely different, but there is no change in the foundation of eclectic leadership. So, also eclectic leadership, it is a series of models and methods that combines leadership techniques from Western and Eastern traditions, indigenous and principle-based sources, right? So this is important to understand that one of the problems that the eclectic leadership is trying to resolve is that of a fragmented or partial view of leadership development that we have. We are trying to address it by bringing in leadership wisdom from all sources, not only Western, but also Eastern. We're looking at leadership principles from the indigenous sources and even principle based sources, your faith based sources, because that plays an extremely important part in many people's lives. And there are a lot to learn from in terms of leading yourself and others from a lot of these sources. So what happens is that, being true to the definition of eclecticism, we draw all of these inspiration from these range of sources, and then which empowers you to seek clarity, and that empowers you to weave more kind of deeper connections. And in the end, once you have greater clarity, once you have meaningful connections, it naturally leads you to achieving a confluence of human values. So that is the core essence of eclectic leadership, that we are really passing through a confusing, conflicting, and contradicting times. We really have to rely on a number of sources to understand how we can lead ourselves better, how we can lead others in our societies, business, and politics. And we have to rely on leadership wisdom coming from Eastern and Western, indigenous, principle based sources, faith based sources, and then make sense out of it so that we are able to achieve greater clarity. We are able to weave meaningful connections and achieve the confluence of human values. That's the end result that all of us are aiming for in the eclectic leadership movement. So, the key idea of the eclectic leadership is that when diverse wisdom, which are being drawn from linguistics, psychological, political, and cultural wisdom, when we are drawing from all of these sources and we are trying to intentionally integrate that into a coherent way of understanding ourselves and others, the value we are meant to. So, the key idea of eclectic leadership is that leadership becomes clear and connected, right, and meaningful when a diverse wisdom, linguistic, psychological, political, and cultural, these are intentionally integrated into a coherent way of understanding ourselves, others, and the value we are meant to offer. That is the key idea of eclectic leadership, that we are integrating it, all of that in a very coherent way. It's not either or, it's all of them. But how do we do it? That's where we step in with the eclectic leadership movement. You've noticed the tagline on the top right of your screen, where we say that eclectic leadership movement is the movement for improvement, where you can lead with improvement. Now, what does it mean to lead with improvement? What we're saying is, in a world which is shaped by biased and fragmented leadership principles and tools and exposure to leadership development, the eclectic leadership movement integrates diverse wisdom into a coherent practice, so leaders can lead with improvement. And improvement, how exactly? We will be leading with improved clarity, with deeper connection, and a true confluence of human values. That is what we mean by leading with improvement. Improvement across three things: improved clarity, improved connection, and improved confluence of human values. What does eclectic leadership empower you to do? So it empowers you to lead with greater clarity. It empowers you to weave meaningful connections and consequently achieve the confluence of human values. That is what eclectic leadership empowers you to do. Again, the problem that we're trying to solve in the eclectic leadership movement is that the bias and the partial exposure to available paradigms of leadership development. That's the key problem that we are trying to solve. So this limited view leads to confusion from a lack of clarity about yourself and those you lead. And that causes frustration when the connections you create are weak. And ultimately, that blurs sight of the values that hold us together as humans. So that is the core problem that we're trying to solve. This is the value pyramid of eclectic leadership. On top, you have the achieving eclecticism. How do you practice eclectic leadership? Under that, you have the three tiny pyramids there, which upholds the eclecticism, the principles of eclectic leadership, which are clarity, connections, and confluence. And when we talk about clarity, this clarity is about three things: clarity about yourself, the skills that you need to progress, and the service that you're meant to offer to the society, to your business, to your country. Then the connections, when we are talking about connections, we're talking about the connections with yourself, connections with others who are like you, who are not like you, who like you, you still have to be with them. How do you do that? Make that connection. And also that connection with the environment, nature, or something bigger that you believe in. How do you actually do that? And finally, the confluence of human values, that what binds us as a humanity. So once you see clarity and once you get clarity about yourself, the skills that you need and the service that you're meant to offer, that enables you to connect yourself, that enables you to weave more meaningful connections with yourself and others. And consequently, that leads you to achieving greater confluence of human values. You start to see the bigger picture. Okay, so that's the value pyramid. Now, we spoke about eclectic as the definition. We also spoke about the eclectic leadership, the definition of eclectic leadership. Now, we want to talk about the eclectic leadership movement, that what exactly is a movement. So, this movement, the eclectic leadership movement, is an alliance of global organizations and individuals who share eclectic principles and are working to create eclectic leaders across society, business, and politics. So, eclectic leadership movement is not just another leadership model. It is not only sold or kind of publicized by one company somewhere in the world. It is not another training or coaching company. It is an alliance of organizations and individuals all around the world who are trying to promote and practice eclectic leadership. Now, definitely there could be an element where the delivery of the eclectic leadership principles can take form of a coaching or a training or masterclass or workshops or a full-fledged course in a university. That depends. But the movement is formed by organizations worldwide. That's the key element, and that's the key takeaway of this slide. And here are the partners that you can see, worldwide organizations who have already joined the Eclectic Leadership Movement. These are all located in various parts of the world, and all of these companies share the vision of eclectic leadership. Now, you might be wondering that, okay, you know the definition, you've understood about the eclectic leadership, I've told you about the eclectic leadership movement, but where exactly is this found? Where do you find the eclectic leadership, eclecticism? So, eclecticism is found at the intersection of four core domains. So, this is pretty important for our movement to understand is there might be many, many sources, as I've mentioned to you before, but we are relying primarily on four sources: linguistics, psychology, political science, and leadership wisdom from diverse sources. These are the four major core disciplines that eclectic leadership relies on. Can you rely on further, more resources? Of course, you can. If you want to rely on arts and music and dance or philosophy, absolutely, that's not a problem. But that needs to be built upon these four foundational disciplines. So these four disciplines, they form the foundational framework, and there is a condition, and they follow the conditions of concurrence, sequence, and preference, which means that all of these four foundations, linguistics, psychology, political science, and leadership wisdom, they must be present simultaneously and in exact order, and any additional domains may be included only as additions, not replacements. So when we say linguistics, psychology, political science, and leadership wisdom from diverse sources, The sequence is pretty important as well. We are talking about linguistics, languages first, the words that we say and read. Then we talk about psychology. We do not talk about psychology unless we have talked about linguistics first, and there are strong reasons for that covered in another video. Just another diagram to illustrate the point that where exactly eclecticism is found. It is found at the intersection of the four core domains. Do you see that red pin? That is where eclecticism is found between applied linguistics, applied psychology, political science, and the pan-cultural, indigenous, and principle-based leadership wisdom. Once we achieve eclecticism, we can then get greater clarity, weave meaningful connections, and achieve the confluence of human values. So one other point to highlight is that why we are positioning ourselves as a movement and not just another model. This is because the leadership problems that we are suffering from today, these are visible everywhere, from dining rooms to classrooms to boardrooms. And across families, schools, universities, business, and politics, the core problems of bias, the lack of clarity that we need about ourselves and others, the talks around identity, the skills that we need, the services that we're meant to offer, the connections that we have to make with others and ourselves, and the absence of confluence, the humanities getting more divided rather than being united. This is affecting us all, right? And it's creating a growing frustration, and what we are feeling across the board, it's not the same. It's not the case that we're feeling it in differently in a classroom setting, and we're feeling it differently in a boardroom setting. The core problems are the same. That's why we have positioned eclectic leadership as a movement, and it's just not another model that we are trying to sell as part of a coaching program. We are really thinking big, and we want to achieve these goals. Another related question is that how is eclectic leadership different from traditional leadership models? So, just to repeat that this is not a same old leadership model floated by tens and thousands of consulting companies. Instead, eclectic leadership movement and eclecticism is a series of frameworks and models and techniques, but all of those are grounded in the core principles of eclecticism. So, as I've mentioned before, that as part of the eclectic leadership umbrella, as part of the series of frameworks and models that we have, the delivery of those models can take form of as a coaching or a class or a course. That is not the issue. But what is core is to understand the principles of eclecticism is very, very fundamental. How we manifest it, how we represent it and package it, and are we working with corporates? Are we working with universities or school children or individuals? That is not important. That will happen at some point, but what is important to understand is that the very foundation, the ecosystem that we have created here is extremely important to understand. That why is it just not another leadership model? It's a series of models. It's the newest paradigm in leadership development. So, who can become eclectic leaders? So, we have categorized them into these three groups. Eclectic education is for schools and universities, to be specific, the secondary schools and the business schools. And then we have the teams in business and politics, and individuals who are wishing to leave a legacy or who are wishing to understand the basics of eclectic leadership and advance their personal or professional life. So, eclectic education, eclectic teams, and eclectic leaders. We have a vision. As a movement, it is important to have milestones. So, our vision is to develop 100,000 leaders by 2035. And we want to create eclectic leaders who will demonstrate wisdom, courage, and compassion, which are grounded in place based, cultural, spiritual, and principle based leadership traditions. So, that's our vision. And our mission then is to develop and teach and certify the eclectic leadership through an inclusive, sustainable, and adaptive movement designed to navigate the complexity and also to enable generational legacy transitions. We have already expanded in various countries, and these are the 14 countries where we already have our advisors and we have started the work on ground in these countries to spread the practice of eclectic leadership. Now, I'm going to introduce to you the various models that we have at a very high level. And I'll just introduce to you what they are, but we will not be taking a deep dive because each of them will require separate videos on their own. We have extensive courses on each of these, but let me walk you through them very briefly. So this is the core eclectic leadership integration framework, the basic eclectic leadership integration framework. It's called Belief. And as I mentioned to you earlier, that this talks about the core of eclectic leadership. Where do you find eclecticism? At the intersection of these four domains. And this is the model that is the foundation of all our work. And this is used in all our leadership design, lab work, and advisory and consulting. Then we have Humanist. It's an eclectic framework based on 12 African community leadership wisdom. Enlightened draws inspirations and instructions from Buddhism, Confucianism, and Sun Tzu's principles of war, and then it puts everything together to understand leadership from these disciplines. Kinder Leaders is an eclectic framework for youth leadership, bearing in mind that there's a wordplay going on here. Yeah, you might be thinking it's kinder leaders, so kindest. Yes, that is true. So we need leaders who are kind. We want our young people to be kind leaders for future. But at the same time, the word kinder, it means children in German as well. So there's a wordplay going on with kinder leaders or kinder leaders. Either way, it makes sense. That Was Me is a discovery of personal USP. So it's your unique superpower. We believe that every individual has got a gift, and that needs to be discovered, identified, promoted, and practiced and shared with others. This framework helps you with that. There are 9 elements. So each of these are the letters in the word that was me. They stand for something like time, health, attention, thoughts, your words, your action, service, money, and end. That is how the letters in the word that was me stand for the 9 elements. And there are a series of questionnaires to identify what that superpower is. Then we have Simple, that's a self improvement model for political leadership excellence. And this is specifically for new or veteran politicians. It's a combination of 21 factors, essential factors that we urgently need. These are the 21 factors concurrently to develop political leaders who we really can trust once and for all. The next one is called the Al Qiyada Al Intiqaya. It's an eclectic framework based on the principles of Islam. Next, we have the troika of operational excellence. So this is very close to my heart as I come from a corporate background in project management and operations. And this framework combines the 3 disciplines of project management, operations, and delivery together to increase operational excellence, to establish operational excellence by focusing on process, people, and technology in any company. Roles and layers are this is a cross-cultural diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging model. And this is a challenge to the typical cross-cultural trainings that we have, which we believe are reinforcing various stereotypes and microaggression rather than helping to alleviate it. Roles and layers is what we're suggesting to talk about diversity in our society, business, and politics. Then you have Six Pundits, which is the high context environment navigation framework, where we talk about macro factors like population, pollution, poverty, etc. And we also talk about the tenacity, the service, the uncertainty that we see in very high context environments. So this is our answer to VUCA, the popular model of VUCA, the volatility, uncertainty, which we believe has run its course. It doesn't apply to high context environments anymore. That's why we have come up with Six Pundits. Then Transfluence is a very important, meaningful model that we have, which is a combination of the 6 steps, 6 phases. But in between, there is the transition that holds everything together. And our argument is that transformation is a buzzword, that lemon has been squeezed for too long. It doesn't taste any good anymore. It has lost its meaning. We are talking about transition, which happens between these 6 phases, and they work like a cycle. Then we have the superlative trap cube. It's a limiting belief framework where we look at 6 adjectives like most, least, first, last, best, and worst, and we come up with these categories which either makes us complacent or makes us feel catastrophic. And there are problems with each of these, and we also try to identify where exactly eclecticism is found. Then we have the semantic sovereignty. This is going to be an operating system for eclectic leadership movement. Semantic sovereignty by Professor Abhijit Chaudhary is providing us the much needed search of meaning for the eclectic leadership movement. So we are talking about messaging, we are talking about marketing, but often we take for granted the meaning of things. We think that just because you know the word of a certain, you know the meaning of a word, you understand what it actually means. But semantic sovereignty is really pushing us to think much deeper that what exactly we're trying to do. This is going to change the way we go about doing brand and business consultancy. Territory mapping is part of our collaboration with Anthony Willoughby and his company and his work on Relevance Research Institute. Very simple 5 questions that he asks about what you're growing, what are you protecting, what are you hunting, where are your mountains and rivers and swamps, and who sits next to you in your fireside. So we are a movement, we needed a map, and we are going to use territory mapping extensively in all of our interventions as an output. Finally, we have Dr. Michael Hagman's book and his framework on the paradigm shift to eclectic leadership, where Michael talks about the holistic approach towards leadership, which he calls eclectic leadership as well, which combines the elements of transactional and transformational leadership. Then we have these 13 modules, which we use for our master classes or longer duration classes. I'm not going to go through each of them, but essentially all of these modules are based on the 4 core domains of linguistics: psychology, political science, and leadership wisdom from various sources. It's just that we focus on linguistics on its own, then we combine linguistics and psychology, then we combine psychology and politics, and then we combine the 3 of the disciplines together. So there's a lot of research, more than 20 years of worth of work behind preparing these modules. Are our advisors who have joined us from more than 14 countries now, and you can find more about their background and their expertise on our website. And this is the information that where you can email us. You can join our newsletter by visiting our website. You can follow our page on LinkedIn, and you can also subscribe to our channel on YouTube. So that brings me to the end of this presentation. I really hope you found this video useful. It's a bit long, but it's a very foundational video. So I want to thank you for your patience. And I would really urge you to join the Eclectic Leadership Movement only and only if you think that the world that we are currently living in now, or the way we are trying to lead ourselves and others, is really confusing, it's contradicting, it's full of confusion and contradiction and conflict. And if you are seeking clarity, if you want to weave meaningful connections, and if you want to achieve confluence of human values, join the Eclectic Leadership Movement. Be an eclectic leader. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.